I'm Mohsen Jamal and you watch Afghan News. Afghanistan is marking the 10th anniversary of the start of the US-led invasion of the country against the Taliban amid growing security concerns and questions over what the next decade will hold. For some Afghans, the anniversary on Friday marks a time of reflection on what the war has meant for their country. However, a day earlier, hundreds of Afghans marched through the capital Kabul to condemn the US as occupiers and demand the immediate withdrawal of all foreign troops. Meanwhile, the insurgency has ceded staff while the foreign forces are scheduled to hand over all security responsibilities to the Afghan forces.
On October 7, 2001, U.S. military planes dropped dozens of cruise missiles and laser-guided bombs on strategic targets in Kabul and other Afghan cities. The U.S. military launched the war in a bid to oust the Taliban for harboring the Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden, who plotted the September 11, 2001 attacks on the U.S. that killed nearly 3,000 people. The air campaign was followed by a ground campaign, and on November 13 of that year, the anti-Taliban Northern Alliance forces entered Kabul, which toppled the Taliban government within weeks. Taliban fighters lie dormant in Afghan and Pakistani hideouts for the next few years, severely depleted by the invasion. U.S. attention then turned to the war in Iraq, but violence flared back up again around 2007 and 2008, prompting a surge in the number of troops sent to fight the Taliban. As those troops began to withdraw ahead of 2014, the Taliban have increasingly focused on launching targeted attacks against foreign forces as well as Afghan military and authorities. The NATO-led International Security Assistance Force argues that this shows it is winning the fight on Afghanistan's battlefields. Figures from the United Nations indicate this year is on course to be the bloodiest yet for civilians, with 1,462 killed in the first half of this year, 80% by fighters. Meanwhile, about 300 men and women gathered on Thursday with placards and banners accusing the U.S. of massacring civilians while denouncing Afghan President Hamid Karzai as a puppet subservient to Washington. Karzai became Afghanistan's leader in June 2002 and won subsequent elections in 2005 and 2009, though they were marred by frauds.
10 years after the West intervened in Afghanistan, NATO said on Thursday its plans to hand over security responsibilities to the Afghan government and gradually withdraw troops remained on track despite recent spectacular Taliban attacks. U.S. Defense Secretary Leon Panetta said he has assured NATO defense ministers that while lowering its own troop presence, the United States would not withdraw important resources such as medical evacuation teams, helicopters, and intelligence gathering assets needed by allies. NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen said Afghan forces were increasingly showing they were able to cope with the insurgency and the handover to full Afghan security control should be completed by the end of 2014. Rasmussen paid tribute to international and Afghan soldiers killed, including more than 2,750 members of the International Security Assistance Force, of which NATO took command in 2006. Afghan Defense Minister Abdulrahim Wardak, who took part in Thursday's meeting, said the security situation was not as bad as portrayed in sensational headlines and estimated that the Taliban had no more than 5,000 hardcore fighters. The U.S. began the war in Afghanistan with a frighteningly simplistic view of the country and even 10 years later lacks knowledge that could help bring the conflict to a successful end, a former U.S. top commander has said. Retired Army General Stanley McChrystal said in remarks at the Council on Foreign Relations Thursday that the U.S. and its NATO allies are only a little better than 50% of the way to reaching their war goals. Of the remaining tasks to be accomplished, he said the most difficult may be to create a legitimate government that ordinary Afghans can believe in and that can serve as a counterweight to the Taliban. McChrystal, who commanded coalition forces in 2009 to 2010 and was forced to resign in a flap over a magazine article, said the United States entered Afghanistan in October 2001 with too little knowledge of Afghan culture. U.S. forces did not know the country's languages and did not make an effective effort to learn them, McChrystal said, adding that the Bush administration's decision to invade Iraq less than 2 years after entering Afghanistan made the Afghan effort more difficult. U.S. President Barack Obama said on Thursday the United States would not be comfortable in a long-term strategic relationship with Pakistan if it felt that Islamabad was not mindful of U.S. interests. Obama told a news conference the United States remained committed to helping Pakistan confront its own problems despite concern over ties between some elements of Pakistan's intelligence services and extremist groups operating in Afghanistan. Obama's words reflect a hardening of rhetoric across the U.S. government as officials voiced frustration with Pakistan more openly following the September 10th attack on the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. U.S. officials blamed the Haqqani network for that attack and others and alleged that the militant group has ties with Pakistan's powerful inter-services intelligence agency. Obama said the United States and Pakistan were cooperating on a whole range of issues and that recent successes against Al-Qaeda-linked forces in the region would not have been possible without Pakistani help. Pakistan urged Afghanistan on Thursday to act responsibly after Kabul accused Islamabad of masterminding the killing of the chief Afghan peace envoy. Pakistan angrily rejected allegations that its spy agency was behind the September 20th killing of Burhan Rabbani by a suicide bomber who hid explosives in his turban and posed as a Taliban representative with a message of reconciliation. Pakistan's Foreign Office spokeswoman Tahmina Janjua told a news conference that it is her country's expectation that everyone, especially those in position of authority in Afghanistan, will demonstrate requisite maturity and responsibility. Pakistan has been on the defensive since the top U.S. military official accused its inter-services intelligence spy agency of supporting a September 13th attack by the Taliban-allied Haqqani militant group on the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. Former Pakistan President Pervez Musharraf has accused India of seeking to create an anti-Pakistan Afghanistan as part of its bid to dominate South Asia. Speaking as part of the ruling panels at the Washington Ideas Forum taking place at the Museum, Musharraf said that there is some kind of a proxy conflict going on between Pakistan and India in Afghanistan, where India is trying to create an anti-Pakistan Afghanistan. India has a vision of dominating the region and aims to create a weak Pakistan, Musharraf said, adding that he understood India does not seek to take over Pakistan militarily, but it wants to dominate Pakistan in the area of foreign policy, economic policy, trade and commerce. Musharraf also complained that India has been training Afghan diplomats, soldiers and intelligence officers and that the training should stop. The former president said he was convinced that Osama bin Laden hiding in Abbottabad, Pakistan was not about the Pakistan government's complicity, but not complicity. It was a terrible case of negligence which must be explained by Pakistan. U.S. President Barack Obama has said that the Occupy Wall Street protests in New York and other U.S. cities reflect broad-based frustration among Americans with how the United States financial system works. Obama spoke on Thursday at the White House, adding that the protests were indicative of public anger that those who helped cause the financial crisis are fighting efforts to curb abuses. Speaking at a news conference, Obama also used the opportunity to push forward his $447 billion jobs bill, the American Jobs Act, saying it would ensure tougher oversight of the financial industry. The U.S. Congress is to vote on the bill before the end of the month. Steps away from Obama's news conference, protesters on Thursday converged on Freedom Plaza in the nation's capital to establish another Occupy camp and rally under the banner "Get Money Out of Politics." Toppled Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has called on Libyans to take to the streets and wage a campaign of civil disobedience against the country's new leaders. Gaddafi, in a recorded audio broadcast on a Syria-based TV, said on Thursday the National Transition Council had no legitimacy because it was not nominated or appointed by the Libyan people. He called on his countrymen to go out in new million-man marches in all cities and villages and oases. Meanwhile, forces loyal to Gaddafi have launched a bid to break a siege by intensifiers and served with heavy sniper fire and intense fighting. Elsewhere, NATO said on Thursday it expected to end its mission in Libya soon, and its decision would be based on whether there was still a threat to civilians and the ability of the country's new rulers to provide security. And that the United Nations has raised its tally of people killed during 7 months of unrest in Syria to more than 2,900. Rupert Colville, a A spokesman for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said on Thursday that the figure was based on reliable sources inside and outside the country. He also said that the names of the dead had all been confirmed and likely included some members of the security forces. Meanwhile, 12 people were killed in clashes between soldiers and deserters in villages of Idlib province in northwest Syria on Thursday. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said adding that dozens were wounded. Elsewhere, an army officer who has taken refuge in Turkey, Colonel Riyad al-Assad, claims to have established an opposition armed force called the Syrian Free Army, but its strength and numbers are unknown. And that is all for now. Thanks for joining us.